If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. We cover the stories both big and small, the epic and the cute, the silly and the tragic. I hope you all enjoy the ride, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. As the Warrior of Light and Themis head deeper into Pandaemonium on their search for a warder, one comes running towards you, but he's clearly not in his right mind. The moment he sees you, he transforms into a much more intimidating form and gets ready to attack. If you want to talk to him, you'll have to knock him out first. Themis, true to his word, uses your ether to create 7 allies because that's the number you'll need for an 8-man raid, and you all face off against the rampaging warder. He wields some powerful abilities, which makes sense considering the types of creatures he has to deal with, but he's nothing you can't handle, and you bring him down, forcing him to transform back. Themis was impressed by both your performance and the power of the people he summoned, but they were made from you, so it only made sense that they would be great fighters. All that's left is to wait for the warder to wake back up so Themis can find out what made him attack you like that. You must have hit him really hard because when he finally wakes up, it takes a moment for his memories to come back. When he first saw you, his mind was full of thoughts of desperation and anger, and he just lashed out. He's glad he hadn't come across someone weaker or they wouldn't have been able to stop him. He introduces himself as Erythonius, a warder of the highest layer of Pandæmonium known as Asphodelos. He had really wanted to keep you out of the place because all of the creatures locked away in Asphodelos have been set free and are wandering around the halls hungry for blood, which is pretty bad, especially since this has never happened before. Each of Pandaemonium's levels are controlled by a key ward who pays attention to even the smallest details in their area. The process they have to go through to get their job is super strict, and their loyalty to La Habrea is absolute. But for whatever reason, things have gotten out of hand. The warders have been trying to get the monsters back in place, but the fighting's so intense that Erythonius hadn't realized that he had got separated from the others. His senses had been flooded by a lot of whispers. Then the only thing he remembers is getting extremely angry, then nothing. Something had attacked him with magic, probably the same thing that had separated him from his allies, and if it wasn't for you and Themis, whatever had taken over him would still have him. He thinks that the fact that you're there means word of their situation has reached the outside world, so maybe you have a bit of good news for him. But telling the man that the protections of Pandaemonium are being taken down from the inside is not quite the news he was hoping for. Those defenses are probably being taken down by the same people who set the monsters loose, but that's not exactly helpful information. A question comes to the warder's mind that he hadn't thought about before. What will Themis' organization do once they hear about what's happened at Pandaemonium? The answer is pretty obvious. They would consider the place a lost cause, cut it off from the rest of the world, and destroy it. That's about what the warder had expected. If the creatures get out, there's no telling how much damage they will cause to the outside world. The words of La Habrea wouldn't want that to happen no matter what, which means Erythonius needs to save the other warders before that happens. He's willing to go alone because the others won't stop trying to detain the creatures, so they'll be fighting them until the place ends up destroyed by the convocation without ever having a chance to escape. The only thing Erythonius asks is that Themis gives him time to help the others before he tells the convocation, and maybe the place won't need to be destroyed by then. While his heart's in the right place, Themis knows that Erythonius doesn't have the power to fix this on his own, and all that would happen is he would die. But the two of you are supposed to investigate the place before he makes his report, and so far all you've done is study the front door, so the warder can tag along with the two of you for a while, which will give him a little bit of a better chance at survival. And of course you're willing to help because they'll be fighting, which makes Themis think of Azim and gives him hope that this will all turn out okay. So for the moment, the three of you will work together, which is good because now you have someone along who actually knows the halls of Pandaemonium. At the gate, Erythonius doesn't hear any sound, which means none of the monsters or warders have made it to that point, which means he has a chance to save them both, because he doesn't want all of their work to be for nothing. Themis thinks that La Habrea would smile at seeing the devotion of his people, but Erythonius doesn't think the man's even capable of smiling. Apparently he's dealt with the man personally. Erythonius had been mentored by La Habrea's predecessor, the one who had run the facility before him. Her name was Athena, and she was the one who put him in his current position. Themis hadn't even known anyone had run Pandæmonium before La Habrea, and it makes him realize that the Warder's desire to save the research subjects has more to do with preserving the work of his mentor than protecting the work of La Habrea. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a clue how to go about recapturing the specimens, since he can't use internment magic. Which, of course, you have no clue what type of magic he's talking about. Internment magic is similar to what he was trying to do to you during your battle, binding you in ethereal shackles, although only the key ward of each tier is permitted to use the true, much more powerful version of that spell. And even if he were allowed to do it, Erythonius doesn't have the power to use the spell. Themis knows a little about internment magic. From what he's heard, La Habrea came up with it, and while the shackles Erythonius used on you would hold you in place for a few minutes, internment can freeze the space around its target for as long as the caster wants. But what Themis knows is the equivalent of someone knowing that a baseball player hits a rock with a stick. He knows what they're supposed to do, but he has no idea how to actually do it. But he does have a whole lot of magical power, so by combining his ether with Erythonius' knowledge of the spell, they should be able to recapture the creatures. It'll be complicated, but it should be doable once you find one of the creatures, preferably one that's alone, so if the spell doesn't work, the Warrior of Light can deal with the thing. The Warder remembers seeing a Hippocampus wandering around the waterways alone, and it might still be there, so that could be a good place to start since most of the other creatures in Pandæmonium aren't really that fond of water. That way you can get your one-on-one fight because the monster will need to be weakened before it can be captured. Think of it as a much more deadly game of Pokemon, where the ancients throw you out in combat risking your life while they stand back in safety, and once you win they can do the easy work of capturing the monster and acting like this was a whole team effort sort of thing. The first thing that I'm positive went through the Warrior of Light's mind when she saw the Hippocampus coming toward her was who thought it was a good idea to make this thing. The head separates from the body and floats around and stuff, making this thing super creepy. It fits better in a Dark Souls game than here, but fortunately you have the people Themis manifests to help you fight, which gives you the edge you need to knock the beast unconscious, and when it falls the two ancients teleport in and seal the creature away. Erythonius is extremely impressed by how well you fought. It's not all that often that masters of combat come to Pandæmonium, so getting to see a warrior of your caliber was great. And the fact that the plan worked makes it even better. Magic was never his thing, but with him channeling Themis' power, he actually felt like a proper mage. That sounds strange considering all the stuff he did to you in your fight, but shackles is the only magic he can do since he's been training with it since he was little. But he thinks with you all working together, you can save the place. Even though things are going well, the fact that you haven't seen any other warders has Themis worried. But Erythonius thinks it's likely that the key ward has already gathered up the other warders and retreated to a safe spot. Other than how strong they are, Themis doesn't really know anything about the key wards. The key ward of Asphodelos is named Hesperos. He knows a lot about the creatures under his charge, and he takes a lot of time to personally mentor the warders who work underneath him. He's helped Erythonius a lot, despite his magical deficiencies. He never panics, plans everything, and like the other key wards, he can use creation magic to bend the halls of Pandæmonium itself to his will, which is why Erythonius is positive the other warders are safe, unless something's eaten the man. But with the power to change the environments, that's unlikely. The Hippocampus wouldn't have been nearly as dangerous if you could have turned the room you fought in into a desert, so finding Hesperos should be top priority. The safest place in the area is the center, because if things get bad, the warders could retreat to Abyssos from there. So that's the best place to check, and if things look worse than he expected, that'll tell Themis whether or not he needs to check on Abyssos too. The problem is Erythonius can't change the hallways, and the path you have to take is blocked by the Phoenix. Don't know why they spelled Phoenix that way, but it's still an immortal firebird with very strong healing powers, so it's something that won't be all that fun to fight. Especially since it's one of La Habrea's personal creations that didn't turn out quite right. Instead of being a peaceful, helpful bird like you would expect a phoenix to be, this one is crazy and just wants to burn stuff. That might be why they misspelled the name, to show that this one was almost right but not quite. A lot of other ancients had tried to make the perfect phoenix, but they failed over and over again, so they gave up. All but La Habrea, and he eventually succeeded. There was more to the Phoenix story and what happened to it after it was brought to life in Tales from the Shadows number 4, which I covered on the channel and will link in the card at the end of the video so you guys can check it out. While making the Phoenix was a big accomplishment, the researchers of Pandaemonium didn't even make a note of it, let alone celebrate. The only time the work of the Words of La Habrea really affects them is when something they make has to be locked away. But thinking about the past is pointless when you have things to do, and it's very likely you're about to have to fight one of the most savage creatures in Asphodelos. But at least you're fighting it in a building instead of somewhere where its powers can really shine, so it's best to get to it. Sure enough, the three of you spot the Phoenix flying around outside, but the minute you see it, Hesperos, wearing his best Dracula cosplay, changes the area to a place filled with flame that will definitely make the Phoenix stronger. Before it can attack you, the ancients teleport the three of you away. Erythonius doesn't understand why Hesperos would do that, but Themis thinks it'll be better to worry about that after you all deal with the Phoenix, because fighting it in the new environment is going to be super difficult. And it really is. I hate everything about this fight against the most horrifying Hydra-Phoenix hybrid I have ever seen. But after lots of flame and death, the bird is brought down and sealed away. With that done, it's time to worry about why Hesperos tried to have you killed, but the ancient shows up so you can ask him yourself. He had expected the bird to delay you, but it was weaker than he thought. Hesperos' personality doesn't seem anything like what Erythonius said it was. The man insults the water's intelligence in every way he can, so either something's taken over him, or he was secretly a jerk all along and he's just not hiding it anymore. But he does reveal one very interesting tidbit of information in the midst of his insults. Erythonius is La Habrea's son. The fact that the son of the man he respects is so weak seems to really get on Hesperos' nerves, especially considering what he has managed to do in service to La Habrea. He's merged with one of the mythic creatures and has nearly made himself into a god. He attempts to use internment on the three of you, but Themis has mastered the spell in the short time since you've been in Pandaemonium, and he breaks out of it. Since you have no idea what this vampire impersonator can do, the three of you retreat. While Hesperos does think you're all weak, he is impressed by how you overpowered the Phoenix and how Themis mastered internment so fast. But either way, he's confident that if you come after him trying to interfere with his work, you'll die. But he knows you're going to come, and he's waiting for it, because even though Erythonius is weak, Hesperos still has a use for him. Themis had suspected that you'd have to fight the Key Ward, and he's not looking forward to it. But at the moment, he's more worried about Erythonius. Having someone you respect and admire treat you like crap is a crushing experience, and Themis hopes that doesn't break the man, especially since you don't really have the time to let him process things. La Habrea had made the protection wards around Pandaemonium, and the ability to bind things is the only thing Erythonius has in common with his father. Themis had already suspected that the two of them were related once the man had said that he had practiced the binding magic since he was little. La Habrea had taught him to cast that spell, but he was mostly taught by his mother Athena, La Habrea's predecessor. She had brought her son to Pandaemonium. La Habrea hadn't had anything to do with that. It wasn't until after his mother had died that La Habrea took her place, and the fact that he didn't even seem to care that Athena was gone is one of the main reasons why Erythonius hates him. Even though Themis doesn't know La Habrea personally, the little bit that he has seen of the man gave him the impression that he was a little cold-hearted. This isn't a conversation that the warder is all that interested in keeping going, so Themis changes the subject to something that's equally uncomfortable. What to do about Hesperos. The other warders are probably prisoners somewhere, so they definitely won't be able to help. And Hesperos is expecting you, so he's going to have all of the advantages, which means you don't need to give him more time to prepare. Instead of going after any more of the loose monsters, you're going to take the fight straight to the Key Ward, but that doesn't mean you know how to beat him. However, since Hesperos claims that he became one with one of the creatures, he may be vulnerable to the internment spell. Themis doesn't think locking the man up is a good enough punishment for his crimes, but Erythonius wants to know why the man turned on them. The man claims he's helping La Habrea, but destroying his work doesn't really make sense, so Erythonius really needs some answers. Themis is curious too, and so are you. Plus, if locking him up doesn't work, you can always finish him off. The warder did notice that Hesperos had the fangs of a Vricolaus, a beast that feeds off of ether, and that's likely what Hesperos fused with. So he's a literal ether vampire, and he can change the environment, so the fight is going to be rough. But what else is new? So it's off to fight Dracula Jr. you all go. The Key Ward constantly changes the arena, making for a very painful experience. But after a lot of blood and death, and I mean a lot of blood and death, you bring him down. Themis and Erythonius try to bind him, but of course he breaks free. I don't know why they thought they could bind him with the same spell Themis learned how to break after only a few hours, but they did, and it didn't work. Hesperos admits that he shouldn't have underestimated the three of you, but even though he lost, he has no intention of giving you the answers you want, and instead of letting Themis interrogate him, he impales himself on his own sword and dies, leaving Erythonius to wonder why he would do all of this when he had everything he could have possibly wanted. It could have been something as simple as his own desire to impress his master, pushing him to take bigger and bigger risks until he just did something stupid to get attention. Which that's something Erythonius can understand, but now it's time to find the other warders and get Asphodelos back under control. Fortunately, with Hesperos' death, it's the perfect moment for Themis to take control of the place. But when he reaches out with his ether to do just that, he senses something from the next level of Pandaemonium, a place called Abyssos, and whatever it is puts up a ward blocking you from going further. Instead of trying to break through the ward, Themis decides to head back to the entrance so he can get a better view of what's happening. But one thing is for certain, your investigation isn't over because Hesperos clearly wasn't behind what's going on in Pandaemonium. The same magic that had affected Erythonius and made him attack you could have also caused the changes in Hesperos that led him to merging with one of the creations, which means you're probably going to see more warders merge with monsters in the not too distant future. But the fact that Hesperos attacked you alone could mean that it takes a while to make these hybrids, so there's still a chance to save the others, once Themis finds a way through the ward. And since Themis did manage to take control of Asphodelos, he can lock up the remaining creatures without too many problems, but since Erythonius is the only warder left on the floor, he'll need his help to keep them locked in place. This whole thing is a lot more complicated than Themis had planned, but he still won't tell anyone outside what's going on until after the other warders are found, and he finds out what took them. But if worse comes to worse, Erythonius is willing to ask his father for help. For now, the two ancients think you should take a break. They won't need you to fight anymore on this floor, but when the two of them break through to Abyssos, we all know what's going to happen. Not to mention you need to tell Claudian and the others what happened. After what you tell them, they're surprised that you aren't dead, but they're new to dealing with you, so their ignorance about your plot armor can be forgiven. However, you still haven't found out who created the crystal that drew you to Pandaemonium in the first place, which means neither of your investigations are over, and there's no telling what you'll find by the time this all comes to an end. This concludes the story of Pandaemonium Asphodelos. If you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube stuff. Hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you really want to support, sign up to become a member of the channel. Until next time, guys. Later.